Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We have REC Solar with us, and this is our Green Tech webinars series. I'm Kendall Schmidt. I have Brian G and Brian Lynch with us, and we'll just jump right into it. So just a quick housekeeping. This is the Demio setup here, but there are not going to be data sheets and resources under any of the handouts, but we do have the ability to answer questions at the end of the event. And please put those in the chat box and we'll be monitoring those. Very likely we'll wait to the very end to have Brian and Brian answer those for you. And then the recording of today's event will be mailed out. So I see already somebody's asking about that, and we certainly will do that for you. So my name is Kendall Schmidt. I'm a product specialist on energy storage for Green Tech. Our little group does a lot of work with any of the energy storage vendors, anything from trying to migrate through new products that are out there, understanding what the products do, what customers need them to do. We do trainings, we work on policy, etc. And as a battery person, we're very concerned about the quality of panels that go on systems. We love marrying up energy storage products with the REC panels, high efficiency panels that get us the maximum capability out of the charge and discharge cycles for the energy storage systems as well. So that's how I'm involved in this. Quick plug for our design services. I know a lot of people have not understood that Green Tech does have an extensive design network. We've got over 40 engineers that are capable of doing design on residential systems, C&I systems, off-grid, whatever it might be. Basically, there's a process through our PCs to get quotes on your project for designs all the way to fully stamped drawings with EE stamps or any sort of stamp in all 50 states. So please make use of that if you have the opportunity. And then these webinar series, this is our Green Tech webinar series. And just so you know who we are, we're a distributor in the renewable space. We have over 100 stores in North America, 12 of those focused on C&I, very high focus on the residential solar market. And basically we offer these webinars as an opportunity for you to learn more about the marketplace, more about particular products, and deepen your knowledge of the renewables industry. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian G and Brian Lynch from REC. Thanks very much, guys, for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing what you have to present to us.
Awesome. Right on. Thanks, Kendall. Quick mic check. Make sure I can operate this correctly and don't start us off in a kerfuffle. I appreciate Kendall not trying to attempt my last name. My name is Brian Gilia, difficult to pronounce, and I do go as BG here at REC. I'm a Senior Director of Business Development. I head up sales for the Americas. Really excited to be with the group today. I've got 15 years of experience in solar. Spent the first 10 or 11 with Sunrun and have been over on the manufacturing side for the last 4.5. So we'll get into more detail about kind of the expertise and opportunities we have, but really excited to be with you guys. Mr. Lynch, I'll let you introduce yourself.
I appreciate it, BG. Guys, real easy. Two Brians on the call. This is like the mullet team. We got business in the front, party in the back, but maybe it's the backwards mullet. So I recently joined REC at the beginning of the year, doing business development and strategy work for the team. Been in the industry for 20 years, and prior to REC, I was the SVP of sales at ADT Solar and Sunpro. Prior to that, ADT acquired Sunpro. So what you have here is two Brians with a phenomenal amount of D2C customer experience. And so for those of you that are not with Green Tech, we've lived in your shoes. We've run sales teams, we've done sales enablement. And so we want to be a really good partner and resource to help your teams be more effective. All of our contact information is right there. We're going to do the full REC team next and all their contact information. This relationship works really well when we can be a business partner and help you all be more successful with our products and services. So please reach out, text, email, anything but fax works for me. And with that, we will jump into this.
A fax does work for me. I'm old school, but we didn't include the information. And yeah, Lynch has it right. A ton of B2C experience here. And so for today's presentation, we're going to keep it pretty technical light. We're not here to go deep on the technology. We're really here to help you, improve your sales efficiency and efficacy at the kitchen table. So these webinars are best when we can be as engaging as possible. Do feel free to throw in questions, chats, comments into the chat poll. We'll be moderating that, and we'll try and touch on those as much as possible as we go. We've got some fun at the end for you all, and with that, we'll jump in. All right, so this is the REC Group team for the United States. I do ask that you guys, if you don't know your CAMs, take a screenshot of this picture. We're going to email out the deck after this, so you'll have all of the contact information. CAMs are key account managers for the respective regions. The fun that we're going to have at the end here requires that you reach out to your CAM and ask them for a specific answer to a question. And then with that answer, we'll have a raffle at Ari Plus at our booth that can get you guys some exciting prizes. And more importantly, what we're going to give you today is just a flavor of what we can go into much more depth on in-person trainings with you and your teams. Again, almost everybody on our team has a breadth of experience in residential in-home sales. And so we take it beyond just selling, modules to how do you sell solar more effectively, particularly in times where, the market cycle may be a little bit down. If you've been in the business more than 5 years, I've been in it 15, you've seen these cycles a couple of times, right? And so we want to address that head on and give you guys a different perspective, maybe some tools and resources to help you be more effective in today's business environment. So again, that's our team. Take a screenshot and we'll touch on that at the end. And so what are we here to talk about today? We're trying to talk about translating solar into new operational success. The reality is, demand has softened a little, but solar still has tremendous value to consumers. And if you've only been in the business for the last 2 years, you may not have built the muscle on how to sell in a higher interest rate environment with slightly softening demand. And we want to get underneath that and kind of give you guys some tips and tricks to help do that. Before we go into that, we do have to give the plug on some of our products. So let's talk a little bit about REC Group. We'll do this relatively quickly. REC at a glance, we manufacture out of Singapore. This is our Singapore facility. Everything you see is vertically integrated here. One story I like to tell is that the white buildings you see in the upper left-hand corner, that used to be the ocean. They're actually growing land in Singapore. And so we strategically invested into Singapore 10 years ago to build a state-of-the-art facility. We wanted to diversify our supply chain away from what was predominantly becoming a Chinese supply chain. And so we're pretty proud of the fact that we are one of very few module manufacturers that can make that claim. All the products you see come out of this factory and are shipped directly here to the United States. We do have a global footprint. We have operations in Norway, in Munich, and in Singapore. This slide is really just to kind of show why we've strategically decided to have that geographic footprint. The headline is that it keeps us globally competitive from a cost basis, and it also gives us the greatest access to market from a business standpoint. And we can go into more detail with you on that at the CAM level. This is our roadmap and our product today. Come by our RE Plus booth and you'll see many of these plus some more, which we'll touch on at the end. Again, not going to go into a ton of detail on product today, but did want to at least touch on what we offer. We have our NPEAK 3 400 watt black module. That's an N-type product. Probably our most popular product is the Alpha Pure, which is heterojunction. And then we do have Pure R, which is a 420 watt heterojunction module. At REC or RE Plus, we'll be introducing some new products that will get up to 470 watts, and we're either going to be introducing a commercial module that will eclipse 600 watts. The headline here is REC is a technology leader, right? We've invested in new technological platforms that are cutting edge. And that entire investment is predicated on creating the most kilowatt hours out of the modules that you receive. That's the reason that I joined REC Group. For the longest time, I sold solar at the kitchen table to homeowners. And the most value you can offer is getting the most power on the roof and producing the most kilowatt hours over 25 years. That relates to the highest level of savings, which is ultimately what will help you differentiate yourself as an installer and help a consumer make the decision to go solar. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation, it is that REC Group is a technological leader and that our product produces the most power, most kilowatt hours of any other on the market. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. All right. So as we said, kind of at the top, we're in a bit of a down cycle, right? For those of you that have been in the industry less than 2 or 3 years, you've really only seen an up cycle, right? Where the market was benefiting from low interest rates and easy access to capital. As interest rates have increased, we're in a bit of a down cycle. And so the game has changed a little bit, but the fundamentals have not changed. For a long time, solar was a bill swap sale, right? Where we had to convince somebody to go solar and not necessarily save money in day one. It's worked for a long time. It works today. It's really about refining your pitch and getting back to the basics. And that's what we're going to spend about the next 15, 20 minutes on. So solar really at its core is about 3 basic questions and objections. If you can overcome these 3 objections, you'll have success. And so as you go into a sales appointment or as you train a sales team, ask your team, ask yourself these questions, and then ask your customer to answer these questions. If you can get yeses to these, you'll get a yes to the big question, which is going solar and getting a new customer. So the first one is, are you the right contractor? Sell yourself, sell your company, differentiate yourself. REC Group can help do that, right? We have the best product on the market. It's going to offer the most savings. And then you have all of the additional benefits that make your company different and better than the rest. Sell yourself first. Secondly, sell the technology, right? People value premium, and we're going to go into some Harris poll data that suggests and really points to how consumers prefer premium. And so we can be an asset to you in selling the right technology. And then lastly, it's solving the economics for the consumer. And those economics have changed, and that's really the meat and potatoes of what we want to get into today. So with that as a backdrop, when was the last time you as a sales leader, as an individual, looked at your pitch and reevaluated your pitch? Now is the time to do that. And in doing that, we want to get back to the basics. So, for myself, I've led sales organizations for quite some time. What we often lose sight of, and it's easy to do, but you need to double down on is, are you running a repeatable process, right? The very basics of making sure that you have a repeatable, scalable process at the point of sale is critical in improving performance in a cycle like today. So everybody has their own cycle. I've seen 5-step, 6-step, 7-step cycles. This is the 7-step cycle that we used to run. Start with rapport, set an agenda, right? Do a discovery lap where you're understanding the needs of the customer and also educating them about how solar can benefit them for their specific application. Talk about why they should work with your company. And then as you sit down at the kitchen table, begin an in-depth bill review that builds urgency. After you've done those 4 steps, then you can present a solution, right? And then you close off of that solution. And at the end, if you've done this effectively, you can ask for referrals. That creates new leads for you. That creates a durable business model. This often goes for granted. And if you haven't invested the time and resources to make sure your team is running a scalable process, now's the time to do it, because you can get appreciable gains from just the simple tactics of making sure we're running a consistent process. As you do that, you probably realize it's time to reevaluate and refresh that sales pitch, right? So are you doing the right needs analysis at the rapport stage or in the discovery stage? Are you really differentiating your company, and how can you get better at differentiating your company? By the way, REC Group's here to help. We can help you differentiate and set yourself apart. And then most importantly, and what we'll spend more time on, is how are you creating urgency at the point of sale? The cost of doing nothing is really how you can drive consumers' decisions. And that's the specter, that's the ghost, right? That's how you build pain and create urgency at the point of sale, is what is the cost of doing nothing today, right? If you do nothing, you're subject to a monopoly, you're subject to rate increases. I'm getting ahead of myself, but we'll touch on that in a moment. And then the last part is, as you reevaluate your pitch, measure and manage it, right? Score your employees, score yourself, right? After I did a sales pitch, I always looked, did I hit each of the 7 steps? If I didn't, I would prepare for the next pitch and get ready to hit those 7 steps again. If you're managing a team, score your team, see how they're doing against those 7 steps, and then allocate leads based off of that score. If you can get the best leads to the best performers on your team, you're going to see an immediate bump in your sales. Lastly, celebrate. Have fun, right? This is the one that often goes overlooked. It's the easiest to do, right? But be sure to celebrate your successes with your team each and every day. So let's talk about how things have changed, right? The convenient headline is that consumers aren't buying solar in 2023. There's no urgency. And certainly there's a lot of data that can support the fact that solar sales are down. If we look at ohm data here on the left, and apologies guys, I know this is an eye chart, so we'll ship it out. You can consume it at another time, but I'll give a bit of a voiceover on it. The chart on the left just shows permits year over year on an absolute and relative basis. The fact that the year over year number is going down and to the right means that consumer demand is slowing, right? And that is the reality of where we are. If you look at the graph on the right, you'll see that we've been in a upward trend for the better part of 2 years, and in Q1 to Q2, we saw a downward trend for the first time. That doesn't mean that nobody's going solar. It just means that demand has slowed down, right? And there's a lot of drivers for that. There was California NEM 3.0. There's increasing interest rates. But consumers fundamentally still do want and still are purchasing solar. And so why are they doing that, right? The number one reason is that they want to buy less from the utility. And this is when we get into our sales pitch where we have to, we used to talk about drive the knife and build the pain, right? What's the cost of doing nothing? The cost of doing nothing is buying electricity from your utility that is going to increase 3 to 5% annually forever, right? We're going to talk about what that means in terms of dollars and cents in a minute, but that's the number one reason that customers are buying electricity today: ongoing increases in the cost of power. The top 10 states with the highest rates of power are listed here. It's a little small, so we'll send them out. But guys, each of these states have kilowatt hour rates that are above 20 cents. That's far higher than what solar will cost you if you look at it over the life of the system. And utilities are playing a lot of games, right? They're changing the rules to make it more expensive during the middle of the day. If you live in a market that doesn't have time of use, it's coming, right? California did this 5 years ago, and it's coming to many markets quickly. So those are kind of the forward-looking signals for why somebody should go solar today. There's a lot more underneath this. Reach out to your CAMs and we can help get you some resources to understand what's happening with your own utility. But you need to be a subject matter expert about what's happening with your local utilities and be able to paint the picture of rates increasing at 3, 5, 6, 8% annually, because it's reality. That is going to happen. And so why else are consumers buying electricity? Or buying PV? There's more and more electrical demand coming online. Number one is electric vehicles. I'll raise my hand. I try and walk the walk. Bought an electric vehicle, a Ford Lightning, in November. My electricity went up 40%, right? So the average electric vehicle will increase your demand by 40%. Guess what? It's saving me from $5 a gallon gas. I want to get a second electric vehicle, right? And so these are the leading questions you want to ask your customers as you take a lap, as you do your discovery. Have you thought about an electric vehicle? Oh, I noticed that 12-year-old plug-in electric hybrid. Are you ready to upgrade for that? Are you thinking about an electric vehicle? Let's plan that into your design. The graph on the right here shows what EV adoption will look like. It's not the only driver of higher electrical demand. Certainly people are retrofitting appliances, but this is the biggest driver. And so when you do the proper discovery, you find out the consumers are looking to increase their electrical demand. That's the perfect segue into why using the right technology matters. We want to get as much power out of your roof as possible. We want to get as many kilowatt hours out of your roof as possible. And that's why we work with REC. That's why we use the best technologies. All right, so why do people go solar and why do they prefer premium? We've done there's been a lot of studies about consumer behavior in general and specifically to solar. We did a 2020 Harris poll on purchasing behaviors. And some of the key findings were that homeowners view solar as an investment in their home and in the future, right? So if you're focusing just on month one, year one, you're not catering to what a homeowner is thinking about in terms of going solar. We need to take a longer view. You need to think about this in terms of a minimum of 10 years. But again, the warranted life of this is 25. So we have to be talking about it in those terms. Customers are more apt to go solar if they have savings on day one for sure. But if we frame this over 25 years and do it properly to explain the cost of doing nothing, more and more people will go solar. And then finally, using a premium product actually drives more conversions. When consumers, are making this type of an investment, spending $1,000 more to get the premier product often is an easy yes when they understand it in those terms. I'll pause here. Lynch, this is something you're passionate about. Curious if there's any additional comments you have here.
No, I think you hit on the key points. The key takeaways here is really go back to your proposals and the way that your teams are pitching and evaluate that they're using the right words. You want to speak to language that resonates with the customer, which you'll get out through discovery questions, whether when you're setting the appointment or when you're doing the walk around. But again, very subtle nuances, like let's not talk about the cost in dollars per watt or the expense of the loan payment. Let's talk about the investment that they're making in their home, because that reframes the whole decision-making process in their head, where, and as the chart shows, the infographic, 70% of consumers are willing to pay a premium if they can be convinced that there's going to be a better long-term return on that. There are 30% of homeowners who will just want the cheapest things. Maybe they're thinking about flipping the home. They just want the appreciation. They want the tax credit. That's fine. That's a value customer. Folks that are very successful with REC usually don't win on price. They win on value. And that's a very important message. Let your competitors compete on price. As my dad used to say, if you fight crazy and you win, it just proves you're crazier. If you undercut your competitor by a penny or a nickel, it just proves you're willing to not make as much margin or even lose more money than your competitor. That's not a sustainable business strategy. Go premium, go high, let them fight in the mud.
That's right. And the last point I'll make is the home is the largest asset an individual owns, right? It's the biggest investment they have. And you're talking about an investment on their home. Frame it in that context. People will begin to value the premium that you offer. All right, so how can you sell more today, right? These are the actions that we wanted to tee up for you guys that you can take away today and insert into your individual sales processes or your team sales process. Guys, each one of these topics, we could spend an hour on each one of these topics. I'm gonna spend like 2 minutes on each. And so the call to action here is, if this resonates, if this lands, go back to your CAM and say, I'd like to go deeper on any one of these topics. We've got in-depth trainings built out on each of them, and we'd love to get together with you and your teams to help enable this within your guys' organization. So it starts with demand inquiry, right? And we talked about this already, but I'll just reiterate it. The key to having a successful consultation is asking the right questions at the front end of the consultation and understanding the buying motives. Also helping to guide the conversation, be a subject matter expert and explain how demand shapes the solution, and how it's not about what they're buying today, it's about what they'll be buying in the future, right? That's what tees up the premium pitch. By and large, people should be maximizing their roof space and going as large as possible as a hedge against future utility rate increases. And so that comes up, that leads to the second bucket, which is a deliberate bill inquiry. This is the most critical point of the sales pitch. If you don't have a refined bill review, get better at it today. If you have members of your team that may not be good at reviewing the bill, spend 30 minutes on it today with your sales team, training and practicing on how to review a bill, educate a customer about it, and then begin building urgency about what will happen in the future from your utility.
Hey, BG, I'm gonna hop in right here. I see it all the time. If you're doing what I call bill division, or you're taking kilowatt hour usage and you're dividing by the total amount of the bill, you are 100% wrong 100% of the time, except like one market where that actually works. Please don't do bill division. It's wrong. It's misleading. Spend time, invest time. If you don't know how to read your bills in your local utilities and markets, there are subject matter experts on the REC team. Green Tech has them. Please reach out to us, because this stuff needs to be presented properly. If it's not, sooner or later, you're going to get a knock on the door from your attorney general. It's going to happen. And please, bill division, it's very simple, but it's very wrong. Don't do it.
So the last two buckets, solar IQ, there is no time machine, right? There's a lot of folks that say, yeah, I'm going to wait for a better incentive or a better landscape to go solar. The best time to go solar was yesterday, right? There's always new policies. There's policy risk, right? And so understanding your customers' knowledge and then being able to inform kind of the policy landscape is critical into building urgency. And then finally, driving the purchasing decision, right? We're going to spend some time on this next. Getting a series of small yeses is what leads you to the kind of natural close at the end of a consultation. And so you tee up those series of small yeses throughout the sales process, getting them to say yes to you and your solution, getting them to say yes to the technology, getting them to say yes to the economics. So let's talk a little bit about building urgency and the cost of doing nothing. We did a lot of analysis at this at Sunrun around consumer mind state and consumer purchasing behaviors. At the end of the day, consumers fundamentally don't like a lack of choice. They want peace of mind, and they don't like risk, right? And so if you can hone in on those three kind of categories, that's where you can start to go deeper into the psyche of the consumer and have more success. So lack of choice is really simple. You've got one utility, right? And utilities are going to play games with the rates. They're going to put you on a time of use. There's risks of rate increases in the future. In California, we just saw a policy change, right? And so it now isn't as beneficial to go solar, but in California, there is a glide path, right? Where you get more incentives if you sign up earlier, right? So that's another urgency driver. And then the peace of mind, it's the classic analogy, right? Like, hey, if I could offer you the opportunity to have installed a doohickey in your backyard that locked in the cost of gasoline at $1.75 in 1990, would you have taken it? Almost everybody's going to say yes, right? Because the cost of gas in my hometown is $5.50. Now that's the highest in the country, but generally speaking, it's $2.50 and $3 a gallon. We're talking about the exact same thing with solar, right? And so that's an analogy that we often use is what you're really doing is investing today, purchasing your kilowatt hours today at a much lower rate. And then getting a series of small yeses. This is the way I've always thought about it, is getting a yes to going solar. That's the first hurdle you have to cover with your customer, right? Get them sold on the concept that solar is a better solution than doing nothing. Next, you need to get them sold on the concept of going solar with you as an individual and with you as a business. That's where REC Group can come in and help out with the technology. You can't start talking about a specific solution until you've got yeses to those two questions, right? Once you've got yeses to those, then you go and talk about a specific solution. And now you've set up yourself for a successful close at the point of sale. We put in some talk tracks here. I'm not going to go into detail on those. We'll email this out to you, but that's the basic structure. And if you find yourself mid-consultation pitching a solution, but you haven't got the customer to say yes, that solar makes sense, stop. go back and say, I just want to make sure that this is an investment that you think makes sense for you before we go forward, right? Those simple tactics really make a big difference. Managers, right along with your team, score them, make sure they're doing these things. Lynch, anything to jump in? Anything to add here?
Post surveys, even if the deal doesn't close, talking to customers about what their concerns were, why they didn't choose your company. There's value in data. You have to weight it appropriately, but I would, get a subscription to SurveyMonkey or whatever tool you're comfortable with and track as much as possible, because you will learn something. We all have good instincts in this industry. Data helps break through that, and it helps you trend spot before things actually become apparent.
All right. So now let's talk about the actual economics, right? Those are the tactics. Those are the soft things that you can do today to start selling more effectively. And that goes beyond solar, but we're here to talk about solar. So let's talk about bill swaps and how they may or may not be no longer working. I hear it day in and day out. Utility rates have gone up. Bill swaps no longer work. They do still work. We just have to sell them in a different way. So let's talk about that. Increased finance fees have kind of inverted the bill swap. I'm going to show a heat map in a moment. Many of you often, are operating in markets that may have retail costs of power that are less than 15, 16 cents. That's kind of right where we see the cost of solar starting to be slightly higher than the cost of energy today. And so that's what this graph illustrates is, in a loan scenario where you have, an interest rate that's higher and a dealer fee as high as 37%, you may be proposing to a customer to spend $10 or $15 more a month on solar than they are with electricity. And on the surface, that feels like a losing proposition. It still can work. We just have to change the way that we talk about selling solar. This heat map shows kind of where the most expensive electricity is. I was working on this last night. I couldn't get the values to show up. I'm not that good at PowerPoint, but the headline here is the Northeast and California and Hawaii have the most expensive power, right? They show immediate savings, but the rest of the country doesn't, right? And so that's really where we have to start talking more about levelized cost of power and a 25-year investment. Lynch is going to make fun of me for this, so you can do it.
Yeah, it's like an ice map. Like I actually tried to modify it for him this morning, and it was embedded. So I apologize to everybody. But yes, everyone knows where there's expensive power. And the other thing too is, right where I live in a hick town in upstate New York. Not that hick, but we have like 4 utilities in my geography. And so if you go from my town, you drive 3 miles to another town, you're going to hit a muni, and your teams have to know that. You have to be using a tool, whether it's Genability or something embedded into your proposal tool, that's going to present the appropriate numbers to your customers. And if you haven't experienced doing that wrong, it's inevitable. So just know your markets. That there's huge disparities even within local cities and towns and villages.
Yep. All right, so let's get into what I think is probably the most actionable or illuminating part of the presentation, and that is, how pitching 25 years and compounding utility rates can really hit home with a consumer. So again, these are eyesores. I'm going to walk through these a little bit, but the graphs tell the story. It's up and to the right. What we really want to talk about is what's the difference between, a 3% annual escalator and a 6% annual escalator, right? And so if you start in the graph in the upper left, this is a model of savings in California, where the base rate is 22 cents per kilowatt hour, and that increases at 3% annually. What you'll see there is that you end at 45 cents a kilowatt hour in year 25. And that can be illuminating, provocative in and of itself. But this is where, when you do a bill review properly, you should ask your customer, hey, you're paying 22 cents a kilowatt hour today. What were you paying for gas 10 years ago, right? Start to get those kind of curiosity questions going, and then ask them to write down, what do they think they will be paying per kilowatt hour in 10 years or in 25 years? They're often going to write a number down that's higher than this. right? Which sets up the fact that you're going to have higher than 3% escalator. If they don't write a number down, you can say like, look, even at 3%, your cost of power would be 45 cents in 25 years. Oh, and by the way, going solar would save you $78,000 in that scenario, which is conservative. So moving to the right, let's say the cost of power went up at 6%. Now your cost of power at year 25 is almost $1 a watt, 89 cents. And we're talking about $115,000 of savings. Those of you in California, Hawaii, and the Northeast, congratulations. You guys have it easy. Solar should sell itself, and you guys should have 75% conversion rates, right? The point here is like we do have to take that long-term look and use the power of compounding rate escalators. It gets more interesting as we get into lower cost markets. So on the bottom left-hand corner, we're illustrating somebody that has 13-cent cost of power, right? If that goes up at 3% per year, you're going to end at 26 cents, right? And we're still going to offer $46,000, $47,000 worth of savings to that homeowner. But that's marginal, right? That's very close to what the cost of going solar would be. It may be more difficult to get somebody to say yes in that scenario. This is where we start to paint the picture of what's going to happen to the cost of power over time. If we had a 6% escalator, the cost of power would go up to 53 cents at the end of 25 years. Your savings would be $70,000, $67,000 in this example. And that's what drives home the decision to go solar today. If you do nothing, you're going to spend $70,000 over 25 years in a relatively conservative scenario. And your ending rate will be 53 cents. Well, let's talk about the cost of solar. The cost of solar is much lower. And that's when we have to start looking at on a levelized basis. Lynch, any additional comments before I jump on here?
Yeah, when I started in solar back in the Stone Age, we were like putting coal into the ovens. Getting utility bills was the hardest thing. Like it was impossible. You could not get 12 months of bills. Now it's super easy. Everyone has apps. They have the utility logins. Your customer should have access to the utility bill so you have an informed appointment. Yes, you can close appointments without, well, you probably can close appointments without bills, but you'll need the bills at some point. Assuming the customer is being cooperative and they're logged in the utility system, have them download the bill from the same period prior. And remember, you know how to read a utility bill. Your competitor probably doesn't. You can show them actually how their usage and how their escalation transformed over the prior year. Now, do that science experiment before you go on the call and make sure it's going to be an escalation of 3, 4, 5, 10%. Where I live, it was actually 12% between 22 and 23. Now this makes it really tangible. The other key takeaway here is this industry is so weird because we talk in dollars per watt. I tried to buy a car in dollars per watt. They didn't. It wasn't an electric car. Right. This is how I think. It didn't work. Right. Our customers don't think in dollars per watt, and so we have to take the lingo and we have to make it understandable to them. And that's where the absolute dollars, that headline number, the 25 years of $115,000 in savings, $70,000 in savings. That's the headline. Now, when you present your cost to install, whether it's dollar per watt or whatever, now you can do the compare and contrast. Is that number higher than that number? Yes. Great. So it looks like you're a good candidate to go solar.
Yep. Well said. I would have liked to have seen you buy a car in kilowatt hours. So what's the call to action here? So this is just a screenshot from, this is from Aurora, right? Go into your default settings, right? And maybe you don't have access to do that. So work with your administrator to figure out how to go into your default settings and begin to toggle, and play with utility rate escalators. And again, standard disclosures here, you can't put 15%, right? Because that's going to get the Attorney General knocking on your door. But you should understand what a reasonable rate is and begin to show those sensitivities. The slide before, this is calculated in Excel. You can create those tools yourself, or you can play with it within your platform of choice. Our CAMs are experts on Aurora, Solo, Open Solar, etc. So let us know which platform you're working with, and we can help you guys figure out how to get the defaults set correctly.
Just real quick, that Attorney General knock on the door. This is something that if there's a crafty salesperson listening to this, or they get wind of this, like they're changing all the defaults because this sells solar. You have to have a real justifiable number. You have to show, if you're in a weird area like I was, where the utility rate escalated so much in 1 year, sometimes utilities will go up in like steps. You really have to annualize that out. And so have good data that backs up and supports what it is. There's future CPUC filings or whatever your version of CPUC is in your local area. So 8% might be right in some areas, but it's going to be wrong in a lot of areas. So again, have a reason for having that number. You can always default back to the national average, which is published by the EIA. I think that's the right acronym. And you can use that as a fallback. But again, just have a number, have a real number, make it be defensible. And if you are someone who has credentials on an admin function for your sales platform, lock it down so people don't play games.
I see some questions coming in. We're running a little long. CPUC does have caps, but this is where they play games, and this is where you should build the pain with the customer, right? They can only increase rates by a certain amount, but what they do is they increase the most expensive rates by 20%, right? But then it blends and it stays within 5%. And again, the utilities are gaming the system to make it so that they can pass through rate increases as quickly as possible because they haven't made the requisite infrastructure investments, and that's what is an entirely separate sales training. All right, so why does REC matter with all of this as context, right? This is the most important part from REC Group's perspective. I mentioned at the top, we produce more kilowatt hours, and this is how and why I joined. My boss now, President of the Americas, Kerry Hayes, said, look, it's real simple. We get rectangles off of boats and into warehouses. It also gets a little bit more detailed when we want to talk about how many kilowatt hours those rectangles produce. The table on the right, the 25-year yield per kilowatt hour, this is real world data. You can go and run this report. It's run out of PVSYST. It's modeled, this particular model is in San Diego. And what it shows is the 3 gold bars, those are REC products. They produce more kilowatt hours than any other module compared to your traditional IBC, your traditional mono PERC, and your traditional N-type TOPCon. We've anonymized the name of the competitors intentionally, but the headline is that our technology produces more kilowatt hours. What does that turn into? When you look at the cost of solar on a levelized basis, it's called the levelized cost of energy. So you take the total production over 25 years, you divide that by the system cost, and you come up with a kilowatt hour rate. If you were to do a cash purchase in San Diego, your kilowatt hour rate is 10 cents. If you consider a loan, and I use the same economics that we reviewed earlier, your cost of power is 14 cents, right? So in effect, what we're talking about is locking you into a renewable kilowatt hour that costs somewhere between 10 and 14 cents today versus buying an unpredictable kilowatt hour from the utility at something like 14 or 15 cents today that will increase over time. That's the nucleus of the pitch. That's how we change the game, and that's how we can compete in today's environment. I went way long. I should have known that I'd be more verbose. I'll pause there. I'll check for questions, and Lynch, you can add any color here or take over.
Yeah, I appreciate it, BG. So let's actually just hit some questions right now. So an important one, someone asked a little while ago, what is bill division? I mentioned that comment. I did provide a reply in the chat, but for those that aren't watching that, bill division is when you take the total amount of utility bill, so $300, you divide it by the kilowatt hour usage of that period, and that's your kilowatt hour rate. And people will then use that to compare your offset rate with solar. That's incorrect if your bill has any sort of fixed fees, taxes, delivery charges, fees that they charge on top of fees because they can charge fees. Solar doesn't reliably offset that stuff, and that's why bill division is incorrect. There are some utilities, I've seen them usually in the middle, like in the middle of cornfields, where your rate is your just kilowatt hour usage, and that's your bill. I think probably everyone on this call doesn't have that. So that's why bill division is wrong. Again, if your teams don't know how to understand what the offset value of solar is, reach out to a subject matter expert somewhere in this world. There's a lot of us, and we're happy to help you decipher that. And again, probably your competitor is doing bill division. And so if your teams are trained on this, they can confidently talk about it. If they can get a copy of the proposal from the competitor that shows that, it's a great way to put fear, uncertainty, and doubt in what they were sold and presented. Blended rate, I'm kind of watching the chat on the side here. Again, if you have fixed fees, taxes, delivery charges, solar will offset some of that, right? If your usage is lower, your delivery charge is a little bit lower, your taxes are lower, but it's a nonlinear equation. And so just be very, very careful with that math. There are geniuses out there far smarter than me on figuring this out. If you have a really good model and you can defend it, then by all means do it. If you're just doing simple division because it's simple, please get a better answer. Other question was about energy storage and how does offering battery storage at the same time aid in sales? Kindle is the battery boy at Green Tech. He's going to say a lot. It's going to really depend on your market. I'd say every market is viable for energy storage. California, 100%. You should be offering storage with every proposal. Sales teams are afraid to do it. It adds cost. It adds complexity. Installers sometimes don't like it. It adds cost. It adds complexity. If you're in anywhere that's subjected to power outages, looking at you, Pacific Gas and Electric, anywhere along the Gulf Coast, now you're selling an insurance policy of keeping that power on. It's a very expensive generator, right? It doesn't make sense everywhere. But what it is it goes back to this investment. People are purchasing solar to invest in having fixed power that they can consume when they want to. The utilities are going to play these cat and mouse games with time of use rates and demand charges and all these things. And so what the battery does is an insurance policy that whatever you produce, you get to consume it. And this is a very tangible thing. I love Brian Gillia's analogy about, hey, if I could go back in time to 1990 and sell you a widget in your backyard for gas, and gas delivery would always be $1.75, would you take that deal with the benefit of what you know in 2023? Yes, you would. Same thing. That's what solar plus energy storage adds now. You can, certainly you don't have to install it, but it's going to be a lot cheaper to install it coincidentally or at the same time than individually. Previously, when you couldn't take the tax credit on the battery system only, that was a good trigger to get people to do it now. Now it's really show them the cost if you do battery only separate from solar. There's going to be a cost to remobilize the team. You might have to upgrade some infrastructure. The team is there installing solar. It makes sense to get a battery now. And by the way, REC is fantastic for batteries because of our high efficiency. You want to charge as much as possible during daylight hours. Here in California, that means you get to discharge when the sun is going down or has set. BG, did I miss any other questions?
There was one about sales pivoting to PPAs and leases. I think at the end of the day, this is the fundamental pitch that kind of supports that. You're selling the kilowatt hour rate. And at the end of the day, our product intrinsically produces more kilowatt hours, which is going to result in a lower kilowatt hour rate and more protection against utility rates in the future. Guys, that's a whole nother training that we can go into much more detail on. At Sunrun, that was my job. I wrote the pitch for how to sell a lease, a PPA, and happy to discuss that more offline. In the interest of time, I think we keep rolling.
Yeah. So real quick, three takeaways from BG's presentation. If you glanced over all of that, sell yourself as the right contractor, sell the technology, sell the economics. Homework assignment: review the proposals that your teams are putting in front of their customers. Do you succinctly answer those 3 questions? Are you inserting REC? Are you inserting Enphase or SolarEdge or whomever you're using? Are you proud of what you're selling and installing? There are a lot of installers that don't name their technology components, or it's just a line item that's output in from their proposal tool. Sell it. Be proud of it. Customers want to know what it is, and they're going to pay a premium if you disclose it up front. All right. Can everyone hear me? BG, can you hear me? I just saw that. Okay. So Eric, it might just be you. All right. So let's talk real quick about what's going on with interest rates, because that's really what's driving the friction. Why have solar interest rates spiked? This is really, it goes back to the Fed and what the Fed has done over the past year. And so it's important to take a step back and understand the why. So what you see up top here in the chart is the federal interest rates from August 2022 and then all the way up through July. And you see this line that kind of goes up like a roller coaster. Up and to the right is the Fed interest rate. Now think about how a solar loan is impacted with that. If you originated a deal, let's say late August 2022, you had a pretty low rate, you had a high dealer fee, lower rate, maybe that blended out to like a 4.9 APR. You're a good installer. So the construction period maybe happened 90 days after that, 100 days after that. Okay, now the loan is funded, but it was done on the commitment of when the deal was originated. You have PTO maybe 2 weeks later, right? And so now the rest of the funds are dispersed. That sits in a bank usually or a credit union, and then those are bundled up with a whole bunch of other assets, and then those get put into what's called an asset-backed security, an ABS. That's done maybe 6 months later. So if you think about the time frame here, you have late August all the way to March where people have committed a loan rate of 4.9, and then they're actually selling those off their books a year later. And then during that time period, the interest rates have more than doubled on the Fed standpoint. Why does that matter, right? Well, because if I'm a pension fund or someone buying that ABS, well, I can get a treasury, which is basically free money or guaranteed money. And so my ABS value has to be higher than that because there's risk associated with that. And so what the solar loan originators have had to do is cost average up faster than the Fed has increased rates. And that's why you've seen a really huge escalation in loan rates relative to the Fed's rates. Now the Fed rate has gone up substantially, but solar rates have gone like through the roof. Okay, so what does that mean? Like, how does that, like, what's the key takeaway? If you believe the headlines that the Fed is done raising interest rates, that means that all the loan originators don't have to cost average up much more. They still have to get through their stuff that's in their backlogs, but stuff will start declining a little bit as they've, as the ABSs kind of mature out and they originate new loans. As the rates drop, and most economists are saying that's going to happen here the first part of next year, now the loan providers are really safe because the loans they've originated are actually worth more than a treasury bill. And so this is why I think that loans are going to actually plateau and then start declining in value, and your cost of origination to get better. Now, this is a rising tide. As utility rates go up and loan rates go down, now your markets are even better. So a little bit of pain, a lot of bit of pain to get to a much better market in 2024. All right. What are some alternatives? Because, hey, those interest rates are pretty horrific. First one is third-party ownership. BG was just talking about that. That's the kilowatt-hour sale. The downside is not everyone can get a TPO, or your TPO provider is maybe your competitor, and so you're not comfortable working with them. I think TPOs are really worth looking into. They are a very viable product for a lot of customers, but they might not be the best for you as a company, as an installer, or for your customer. So really do due diligence. And again, the REC team can help you navigate that world. We have great contacts at Sunrun and Sonova and others. And we never sold a solar loan against a HELOC, home equity line of credit. So the APRs on a HELOC are very similar to solar loans. The difference is the interest rates are tax deductible. So now if you take a 9% effective APR and the homeowner has a 30% tax liability, now it's a net 6%. The other thing is the HELOC is tied to the Fed rate. And so if you assume that the Fed rate is going to go down, then the HELOC goes down over time. And so when you get your tax credit back and then the HELOC starts going down, that can actually be a very advantaged product. Now, they won't go out 20, 25 years, so your payments will be higher, but in terms of offering greater value to your customer, the HELOC is something to look into. And the last thing is a 401k loan. So you can borrow against your 401k up to 50% of the value for home improvement, for a lot of things, but home improvement projects, which solar qualifies as, you can do that. The difference here is you pay interest back to yourself. Now, your 401k provider typically charges a fee to do this. It's like 1 or 2%. But if you're, and it's tied to the Fed rate, so if you have a 6-7% loan rate, you actually pay that interest back to yourself. What's the downside? Well, you lose the value of compounding, and again, the values are capped. I'll tell you the other downside for both HELOCs and 401k loans is if you ask the customer to take an action, it's going to create friction in the process. You're going to have lower pull-through rates. And so be very sensitive to that and really judge your sophistication of your customer. But these are two products that most customers have access to that are much more advantaged than a traditional solar loan in the current environment. All right. UFLPA, ADCVD, up, down, down, left, right, left, right. Right, there's a lot of acronyms floating around the industry. Real quick, since we're coming up on time, what do they mean? This isn't just stuff that hangs out in the trade press. It actually has real world implications. So last week we got the anti-dumping countervailing duty final determination ruling. I'm not going to go into the history and the details of all this. I can spend hours talking about that, but the net is 80% of products imported in the US come from Southeast Asia, excluding Singapore, right? Remember, REC manufacturers in Singapore. Singapore is not involved in any of this. This is Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. 80% of products that hit the US shores come from those 4 countries. The US Department of Commerce did an investigation and determined that those factories that are supplying the US market were actually established to help Chinese companies circumvent the duties on Chinese products that date back to like 2012. 3 companies were found not guilty of that. Bovier, who doesn't really play in the residential space, Q-Cells, not surprisingly, and Jinko. And we'll talk about that one in a second. All these other companies were found guilty. You look at that list and you say, who the heck are half of those companies? A lot of them manufacture the brands that we see floating around this industry. How do you know? Check the manufacturing certificates on the products you're considering to buy, and it might list one of those companies. What if the company's not listed on this table? Well, if they manufacture in one of those 4 countries, they're going to be subjected to pretty substantial duties. Now, President Biden issued an executive order last June that suspended collection of these tariffs until June 2024. And so we have a little bit less than a year where all this product can come in without additional tariffs. But starting June 2024, these duties are substantial. They range from 30% to 250 or just under 250%. And so if you're feasting on some really cheap Yen shine or something, I would question whether or not you'll have access to that. And it's not just, hey, bird in the hand, I can get it today, it's in a warehouse. Can you get a warranty claim? Are they going to abandon the market? Think about these things and the implications for you and your company going forward. Maybe you're avoiding all that mess. Are your competitors doing it? Are your competitors saving 20 cents on a sub-tier module and not presenting the best value to the customer? Sell against that. It's in the customer's best interest that you do it. All right, what else is happening? So we have that tariff holiday that I mentioned, right? Importers are what we've called flooding the zone. They're trying to ram as much product as possible into the US market in front of those big duties being collected. And so we're seeing a lot more product than there is demand, especially as the demand is kind of depressed a little bit. We think come July 2024, so next year, we're going to go back to this period where there's now tariff certainty, but there'll be far less supply than there is demand. And so this is where REC can be a great partner. GreenTech is a great partner to hedge and protect you against that. So just be aware of this price volatility that exists in the component space. All right, so I mentioned Jinko on that last one as being free and clear on the AD/CVD circumvention, but there's this UFLPA, which is the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. This is something that has been actually on the books since the 1930s from a trade law standpoint. You cannot import a product into the US that is implicated in forced labor. There's a report that was issued a couple of years ago from Sheffield University in the UK that unfortunately tied a lot of solar upstream production into the Xinjiang region in Western China, which unfortunately is heavily associated with forced labor. And so Customs has been doing substantial detainments of product that they believe is associated with forced labor. A couple important things to remember here. Just because the company doesn't manufacture in China, they manufacture in Thailand or Cambodia or wherever, it doesn't mean that their upstream inputs don't come from Xinjiang. And so you have to really have hard conversations with your suppliers and trust that GreenTech is doing this on your behalf to make sure that you're using clean supply chain. The other thing is hey, module X was imported last month. This has been enforced now for over a year. They must be clean, they must be good. No, it's not true. Customs has limited bandwidth to do detainments. They have limited bandwidth to do investigations. And so just because an importer was free and clear last month doesn't mean they're going to be free and clear next month. I would encourage folks to access the new Sheffield report. This came out a couple of weeks ago, and it actually lists vendors based on their risk profile for forced labor. Nasty stuff. I don't think any homeowner, I don't think any person in the solar industry wants to sell or install a product that's associated with forced labor. From an ethical standpoint, don't do it. REC is here. We have two products listed, NPeak and Alpha. This is all we manufacture now. Twin Peak 4 is a legacy product and has not been available in the US for over a year. In the report, they call it out, but they say, hey, the data sheet was still on the website. Yeah, we leave old data sheets on because sometimes people have warranty claims. So even though this product was assessed as being very high, know that the products that are coming to the US that we're manufacturing today are believed to be clear. So somebody said unverified. Guys, that's what the report said as being clear. And read the report, download it. It's pretty intensive. Here's the other thing. There's a cost for us to have clean supply chain. And so people are saying like, hey, this other module company is half your price. Why is that? Well, because our cost basis isn't that cheap because we're doing things right. Because we are committed to an ethical, clean supply chain. Please use that. And I wouldn't say shame companies that aren't paying attention to this, but let your customers know that they have a choice. And they have a choice in buying clean, ethical solar. All right, we're gonna hand it back to BG real quick to talk about Ari Plus.
All right, guys, we're good over time. Big show coming. Here are the products that we'll be previewing. We're moving Pure up from 400 to 420 watts, completely compatible with all power electronics. Really excited about that. We're going to be bumping our Pure R to Pure RX. Yes, we know that the naming convention is fun, but that'll be a big 460, 470 watt module. Really excited about that. And then finally, we're putting Pro M out there, which is our 620, 640 watt commercial module. We left the specifics here intentionally kind of fuzzy. We want you to come by the booth, see them, touch them, and then we can tell you more about the products at that time. This is where we'll be on the booth. We do have a big party, which is invite only. The way you get an invite is by calling your CAM. That's Wednesday at 7 o'clock. But stop by the booth so you can see those products. And then finally, enter to win $1,000 off REC modules. So there's a trivia question. You have to ask your CAM what REC America's employee has a relative who is a Major League Baseball player. If you get the answer, you stop by our booth. We'll write it down. We'll put you in a raffle. You'll win $1,000 off off a REC solar system. Good question. What is a CAM? That's your key account manager. And the next slide, this is who you contact to find out which REC America's employee has a Major League Baseball player. Come by the booth. We'll do the drawing on Monday. I'm sorry, I'll probably do it on Tuesday, and we'll go from there. And
for the Green Tech employees, you guys aren't eligible for $1,000 off REC products. So you can also enter the contest. We're happy to support you, but we'll get a separate prize just for Green Tech employees.
Good point. All right, guys, we're a little over. Lynch, I'm sorry I pinched your time. Super valuable stuff that Lynch had to talk about. Hopefully some of the sales stuff helps you guys be more effective today and weather kind of the current market environment. We look forward to seeing you guys in person. Thanks for your time, and let's go out there and continue to win with REC. Go ahead, Lynch.
One quick thing for all the Green Tech employees. If you guys know Jamie Skandarian, send him a note. Today's his birthday. Teams him, text him, fax him, email him. He's down in Southern California. Jamie Skandarian, it's his birthday.
Happy birthday, Jamie.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining, everybody.